I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, celebrating the launch of A Blessing, Women of Colour Teaming Up to Lead, Empower, Thrive with authors and special guest Benita Stewart, VP of Global Partnerships at Google, and Jacqueline Adams, President of J. Adams Strategic Communications LLC. Hi both, very warm welcome to you.
Hi, nice to see you,
Hello, Juliet. Pleasure to be here with you and your members.
It's great to see you both. As founding Women in Worth members, we want you to help shape our community through discourse and dialogue such as this. And I want to start by saying a huge thank you to you for being part of this community. If there's anything this past year has taught us, community is essential in lifting each other and helping support each other, both in our professional and our personal lives, which have become all the more entwined as so many of us have integrated work into our homes or had to make difficult decisions as we adjust to this new environment that we're now all living in. It's so great to see so many familiar faces on here, and I hope you're all doing well following what continues to be a challenging time for so many people. Our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders who want to leave a positive impact on the world and help to create a more inclusive and equal economy and society for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy this session and find it valuable. And for those of you that were part of our Women in Worth Summit back in September, we'll be sharing the short video recap of that event at the end of this session. I'm delighted to be joined by our special guest today, two inspiring leaders, Benita Stewart, VP of Global Partnerships at Google, and Jacqueline Adams, President of J. Adams Strategic Communications LLC, as we celebrate the launch of their new book, A Blessing, Women of Colour Teaming Up to Lead, Empower and Thrive. It's a bold analysis of African-American female leadership and an unapologetic look at their often overlooked role in America's social, political, psychological and economic history. A few housekeeping rules before we welcome Jacqueline and Benita. This is a conversation and we welcome questions from you. Please do type in any comments into the chat function. I'll be moderating that throughout, and you can either ask questions directly to the speakers or I can weave it into the conversation as we go. So let's get started. Firstly, a personal check-in with you both. Benita, how are you doing personally following the sort of past year? You have a big job as well as launching a new book.
Thank you, Juliet. It's been probably a very unconventional year. At the same time, it's been a bit of a flurry. I would say from a business perspective, I think what we're finding in the environment, many businesses, some are challenged, some are seeking new opportunities. And in this case, Jackie and I, we worked on the book 2 years ago. And then with all of the current events, whether it's racial injustice, obviously we're still in a pandemic situation, we found ourselves right in the middle of this conversation. And so I would say it's almost a tale of two cities. It's in the sense that there's one part that is quite exciting in terms of being able to be part of this conversation and launching such a project that's mission driven. And at the same time, I have to put on my business hat to make sure that I'm leading through a crisis and lifting all boats, because many people were in the same storm, as a number of people say, but people are actually in different boats. So I have to be very cognizant of that in terms of inspiring and leading my team.
Thank you, Benita. And I'd love to hear just briefly about your background and sort of what brought you into Google, because you've been there for a while now, right?
Yes, so I actually have been in technology for the majority of my career. I did have some stints in the automotive world, leading the Chrysler brand advertising, and then also doing a few entrepreneurial areas. But in 2006, I joined Google to lead their automotive practice. And of course, we went through the Great Recession. So I can say now, being at Google for 14 years, I've seen the arc of technology and how it impacts businesses and business models. And at the same time, I've had the opportunity to enable our partners and customers in new and different ways through the technology. But it's been quite a ride for the past 14 years. And there's been a tremendous ebb and flow of the technology that has come. When I started, it was just search, and now we have mobile, we have video, we have Android platform, we have the Chrome browser, we have cloud. I mean, there's so many different aspects of technology today, and there's probably still more to come as part of this overall digital transformation.
Thank you. And Jacqueline, how's the past year been for you? And if you could just briefly share with the audience a bit about your background.
I am a recovering journalist. I spent the bulk of my career at CBS News and covered politics and the arts and mayhem, I called it, plane crashes and criminal justice. And quite honestly, this year of almost a year of just being in this room has been restorative in some ways. I have been grateful to have had the final editing of this book to focus on and haven't been rushing all over creation. And I am heartsick about the deaths, the murders, and the demonstrations that have happened this summer. But I think that I'm continuing, but I think that I'm encouraged because the message of this book is optimistic. The message of this book is forward thinking. And so I've been grateful to have had that to focus on this year.
Thank you. And for those, there's a few people that have just joined. I just want to say a very warm welcome to you for joining this special event with Benita and Jacqueline as we celebrate the launch of their new book, A Blessing. First of all, just before we go into the book itself, how did the two of you come to meet and then decide to author a book together? Jacqueline, do you want to say that?
Benita and I are both alums of Harvard Business School. And she's younger than I am. But actually, we met on the day before 9/11. And then we were both volunteering for an alumni activity. And then over the years, we have seen each other socially. We even have the same hairdresser, so we would see each other sitting under the dryer. But I have been thinking about a book for maybe 30 years, and Benita came up with a great idea. And so we did what the title said. We teamed up and spent about a year discussing various concepts. We reached out to a friend of mine who is a very prominent pollster, and we conducted last November a very robust survey of 4,005 American women, quote unquote, desk workers across 4 races and 4 generations. And that robust data forms the basis of our book so that it's not just a memoir.
And we'll get into some of the approaches that you use, because I do think it's really interesting how you approach some of the sort of research around this. First of all, the title is intriguing to me. A Blessing: Women of Color Teaming Up to Lead, Empower and Thrive. Benita, where did you get the title? And just explain what a blessing is for those that don't know.
Yeah, so as we were doing research, we realized Jackie is an only. She was the first African-American female CBS White House correspondent. Myself, I was the first African-American female vice president at Google. And so we shared this common only, which we labeled as unicorns. And as we started to look at a gathering, so if you look at a flock of birds, it is in fact a flock. And then you have a parade of giraffe. And so when we looked at unicorns, a gathering of unicorns is called a blessing. So we said, And so we are. And then our research actually validated that. As Jackie mentioned, we went, which we're coining generational diversity. We went across all generations, but across the desk workers, and that's what's so important for your audience to understand, is that 47% of the Black women within our survey said that they were frequently or always the only person of their race in these professional situations. And in contrast, 73% of white women never, were the only person of their race. And so it was a way to actually center our mission and to center the inspiration that we want to bring across the generations, is the fact that in 2020, we shouldn't be the only. And we'll talk more about that in terms of why, but we believe that there should be more than one, and that our call to all businesses is to hire in multiples versus thinking about someone who is situated by themselves in a professional situation.
And you both certainly are a blessing. I think I want to just talk about the timing of this book, because clearly you had the idea sort of pre-2020, and then you look at what has happened in 2020 in terms of the devastating murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others. You look at the impact that the global pandemic has had. You look at the impact that has had on women, particularly, and women of color. Just talk about what made you want to publish this book now, and what impact has 2020 had on the sort of timing of the release of this book? Because there's a sort of, it's interesting, whilst you hadn't planned it this way, it's very relevant to some of the situations that we're now experiencing.
Well, in January of this year, Benita and I came together and we had kind of a power writing session and essentially finished the book. And I don't know if you've produced a book. I thought the hardest part would be facing a blank computer screen, but there are a lot of other steps along the way. Originally, we were thinking about publishing at the end of September, but given COVID, we pushed it back a few weeks. But as I said, I am heartsick, but I'm also optimistic. There are so many wins that women of color are having, and it's true across a wide variety of sectors. I mean, you look at politics. We have the first woman of color who's a vice presidential candidate for the Democrats. That's a huge win. Look at tennis. Last month, Naomi Osaka won the US Open. Joy Reid is newly installed as a primetime anchor in MSNBC. I mean, we could just go off. Women of color are driving this election season. There are more women running for office than ever before. And they had tremendous wins in 2018. And we'll know in a few weeks, but we can guess that there will be a large number of wins before. So yes, I know all the statistics, and they're calling it a she session in certain industries. But I think there are wins as well, and we need to hold on to those wins. And we have a historic tradition of making a way out of no way. And so we're going to get through this. Benita, do you want to talk about the entrepreneurial side of this? I don't want to dominate the conversation.
Oh, no. I mean, just in terms of wins, I mean, we've seen just reports. I think American Express said it was, I mean, women have been entering and running their own businesses 164% in terms of just overall growth. And actually we saw, an interesting article talking about sidepreneurs and just the growth. I mean, this is, you have a job and you're doing something else. And there's been tremendous growth across women of color, not just in the corporate environments, but also from an entrepreneurial perspective. So as Jackie said, we saw, so many things. And as Maya Angelou says, she goes, we are the miraculous. So we just said, we're going to go in. We are the miraculous because we're also in a situation where there are some deficits. So we are very just vocal about and clear on the fact that we still have no woman of color, or a Black woman who is a CEO for a Fortune 500 company. And so we still have, minimum number of board seats, that's starting to grow, and we're seeing some legislation around that. But still, we said, if we can take the fact that even Black women are the most educated group in the United States, and you start to think about other shaping of the US economy with the Gen Z and the millennials, and between 18 and 29, by the year 2027, according to the census, they will be the majority. So all of a sudden, this is placing tremendous pressure, we believe, on leadership. And so that's why our book is a leadership book. It's for aspiring leaders, women of color, but at the same time, it is for a broader audience. It is, because we go across 4 generations, across 4 races, it's for all women, and it's also for allies. So we say it's for men as well. So when we think about the book, we actually wrote it for everyone to think about all of the miraculous things. And we, as Jackie said, we're winning, but at the same time, there are opportunities. And so that's where we think about all of this talent that is out there. Who is going to go after, and win the race for talent? Because then that can start to change brands, change companies, and change the boardroom. And ultimately, from a business perspective, it can contribute to the bottom line, what we call revenue inclusion. So if you have inclusion, make sure you are diversifying so that you can have a positive impact on your bottom line.
And let me just add one more factoid, if I could. The Census Bureau says that women of color control more than $1 trillion in consumer spending power. And we did a little bit of research, and the GDP of Australia is just a little bit more than that. So, we could be our own country.
Yeah. And I think that number's increasing, Jacqueline. I think it's staggering to look at 2025 and where that number gets to. But you're right, given how much of the economy women control, it still feels like the gender equity balance is very out of kilter with the economic impact that we create. So that's interesting to me. And Benita, you shared some of those stats around being the only in the room or the only person to achieve a certain position or a certain leadership position. And then also, how you both intended for this book to be a source of sort of education and inspiration. What are some of the other key points that you make in the book that you really, or sort of particular missions that you're hoping people will take away when reading it?
One area is also around the scrutiny. So we actually have a whole chapter on stress in terms of just the belonging and well-being. So we found women of color have greater scrutiny, but at the same time, women of color, particularly Black women and Latinx, are more prone to be the first to know in technology, are more prone to actually create a new way. And so from a technology and innovation perspective, you would absolutely want to have these individuals as part of your team. So I think that is one area that I think was interesting. And then we have another chapter on allies, which we call Dreaming of Allies. And we said, what if, when we think about the Reconstruction era, in the Black community was promised 40 acres and a mule. And we said, right here in this environment, what if all of the talent could have 40 allies and a stretch assignment? Because that is something, across, when you think about talent and what talent needs to be able to thrive and ascend, it's that stretch assignment. So we have focused around making sure that we have broad allyship and at the same time have a stretch assignment. And then we've just kind of thrown out this glass cliff, glass ceiling. We said that just sounds, too, from our perspective, why should we have something that could be harmful? A ceiling or a cliff. We said it should just, in today's environment, it should be a glass door. Everybody should just open the door and let this talent come in and thrive.
And talking of scrutiny and progress, Jacqueline, I can't ignore we can't ignore the fact that Kamala Harris is obviously doing incredibly well and taken up that position. But it's interesting, she's getting scrutiny already this early on. And being a woman and a woman of color, I still think she's having to tread quite a fine line, and some of the narrative is around, are you being too pushy? And the scrutiny that she's getting feels very out of context with the scrutiny that possibly other male leaders would be getting. I'd love your thoughts on that without going too much into the politics, but I just think it's an interesting comparison.
Well, I think women in politics have been subject to this kind of scrutiny since they decided to begin running for office. It's really nothing new. I covered the Geraldine Ferraro for vice president campaign in 1984, and we have made some progress since then. Senator Harris's views and expertise are not really being challenged. Her relationship to her husband's business is not one of the areas that is being criticized. So at least, maybe it's a small thing, but but we've made a little bit of progress in that area. And the men get criticized too. Maybe not for the same kind of personal thing. Well, if you have a fly on your head, I guess you do get criticized for that. So it's, those are just the rules of the road in national politics.
I just want to remind our attendees and members to do share your comments and questions. There's a lot of people that liked your recovering journalist comment, Jacqueline. And Amanda just said that she loves the thoughtfulness behind the glass door versus the harm associated with the ceiling and the cliff euphemisms. So thank you for that. You talk quite a lot about the research and the approach that you've taken to this book. Can you share just a little bit about why was it different and why was that important in researching this and the different generations, and so what was the approach as you took to that? Benita, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, first of all, that was probably the most illuminating. Typically, and Jackie, had the pollster, and as MBAs, we decided we had to be grounded in data, and at the same time, we were driving toward this mission-driven project. That was, I think, a critical step for us. We looked at 13 areas. We had 91 questions, but doing the slice across the Gen Z and the millennials and the Gen X and the boomers, that is where we found the difference. It was so illuminating to have that slice. And it was also a bit of a wake-up call, quite frankly, as leaders in our respective technology and media space. It was a wake-up call that, in fact, this generation that is coming up is going to change the dynamics of leadership, and it will be a dawning of a new era. And we've done extensive research, not just our own, but we've looked at a lot of research, and we found that, quite frankly, this new group that's coming up, we started as leaders with IQ, then we had, there was EQ, emotional intelligence, and now cultural intelligence, which is CQ. And that's where we spent the time exploring. So we explored the only, we explored the stress, we explored the scrutiny, the innovation, the talent, and we also explored the role of the manager and supervisor. And that was quite interesting because across the board, 90+% across the board, across every single generation, but particularly, in the younger generation, they felt as though their manager and supervisor will be an important part of their guidance and their career going forward. And the younger generation were absolutely that they will have control. And so this is a flip for the leaders to say we have control over those that are coming into our organization. No, this is, I will personally have control, and I want to be in an environment that is one where I can thrive and have well-being and belonging. And so those were we went pretty extensively, but it was such an illuminating factor to look at those slices of the generation across.
And what can we learn from other generations, Jacqueline? What can
Well,
we
two more things I wanted to add. These younger women are committed to their jobs providing a social good. It's not just enough to get a paycheck. And this attitude of having control over their careers means that they will leave if they don't feel supported by their managers and supervisors. And one more thing, and it was particularly true in the Black and the Latinx women, they respond to the notion of sisterhood. And I think in Benita's and my generation, we were onlys, I'm not sure I even knew to look around and expect to see anybody else who looked like me. But these younger women do. And we feel a responsibility, a privilege to recognize that and begin to partner and work with these younger women. We came up with a metaphor that we take from the natural world, and it's about zebras and ostriches. Do you know their story, Juliet? Zebras and ostriches?
Please share it.
Travel together in the wild. And it's because the ostriches can see, but they don't have very good hearing or sense of smell. And the zebras don't see very well, but they have great smell and hearing. So the zebras can smell the predators and communicate that to the ostriches. And together they help each other. Together they thrive. Isn't that a great way that these generations can work together?
It is, and you think about the generations working together and different races working together as well. So I find it fascinating. And what did you learn from conducting interviews with other successful Harvard Business School alumni? Why was it important for you to include those voices as well?
They're our friends. Isn't that what the boys do? Rely on your friends.
Well, and I would say also we did span the generations. So we actually had a recent graduate. We went all the way back to our 1978 in terms of the span. But the other thing that we wanted to do with our contributors, as Jackie said, we didn't want this to be about us. We wanted this to be, it's mission driven. We wanted it to carry the principle of we. And so we didn't want it to be our story, my story. And so we actually brought in, 8 contributors to validate different angles and different areas of our thesis. And so it provides this great little cocktail of data, having a bit of a memoir, and having anecdotal stories that are shared by the HBS women, the community. And at the same time, it starts to validate through their stories and just to make it come to life for those that are reading the book.
And I still think the fact that they're your friends is a good enough reason. And you're totally right. That's exactly what the guys would do.
Yes, that's what the guys would do.
I want to talk about the importance of diversity in leadership, and we a big focus for us within the Women in Worth community is not only providing a network outside of your normal network, but it is about accelerating progress for women and minorities amid the challenges that we still face, whether it's access to the board, access to investment, access to capital, equity in pay, equal opportunities. When it comes to Black unicorns teaming up, and find how should they find innovative ways to support one another? And what is your advice there?
Well, Benita and I are both very active in the Harvard Business School African American Alumni Association, and I know that lots of other schools, not just business schools, but universities, and I think we're seeing this even with the vice presidential candidate, the sororities. There are lots of groups, but they're kind of isolated, and it would be great to find a vehicle to bring all this brilliance together. There's sort of a historical precedent in the Black community. It was called divide and conquer. The overseers and the slave owners felt that there was danger if too many of us got together at one time. And I think that there are still vestiges of that experience that are, maybe it's in our DNA by now, but that's why we need to break through. We just need to embrace this notion of finally really working together. And in terms of the benefits for everyone, I'm going to guess that you and your audiences know all about the McKinsey research. They've done Diversity Matters for 5 years or more. And the woman who started this work is an HBS African-American alum, Dame Vivian Hunt. She heads McKinsey's office in London and the UK and Ireland. And their consistent findings are that diverse senior leadership teams deliver economic benefits to the corporations in which these diverse teams exist. And it's like 30%, 31, 33, 35% improved performance. And it's kind of a duh, if you want your bottom line to improve, have diverse views in your decision-making process.
And I mean, it seems so obvious that the diversity in terms of cognitive diversity, in terms of background, in terms of experience, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of sort of socioeconomic upbringing will drive, we know that there's clear evidence that it drives better creativity and better impact to the bottom line. And also, I think it's more fulfilling for teams to work in a more diverse setting. So why do we still see some industries sort of really struggling with this? And what are the barriers do you think that are preventing people from creating, from sort of really sort of embracing this breakthrough time? Because I agree, it is a breakthrough moment, I think. Benita, what do you think?
I think it starts with the leaders, quite frankly, and that's where we're focused on. How do we actually provide actionable insights to leaders? I saw a question on the chat. How should leaders be preparing for this new generation to enter the workforce? Yeah. And that's the question that every leader should be answering. And so whether it's an ally, we're saying you need to hire in multiples. Just don't hire one and you're done. You actually need to have a multiple strategy. So that's one. You need to be able to separate potential versus perfection. Because what we found, and even you'll read through the stories of the contributors, how perfect we had to be all the time. And so, but there's so much potential there, and you have to, as a leader, be able to differentiate and really bring forth the potential. And the other thing is there was a Deloitte survey just around leadership traits, and this was a global survey, so it wasn't just the US. They looked at a number of global markets, and some of the traits that they talked about are similar to just getting started, like commitment. Are you actually committed? That's the first step. Are you all in? Are you actually committed to receiving the bottom line that diversity would offer you in terms of having that level of innovation and creativity on your team? And then it's just cognizance of bias. Everyone's doing unconscious bias training, but are you really embracing it? Because it's not you do the training once too. So it's not you hire once, you do the training once. No, this has to be a lifestyle of culture, really looking at cultural intelligence and building that muscle. So it's just similar to IQ and EQ. No, this is all of our leaders will have these traits. And to be able to move forward, but those are just some of the traits that are important. But having that commitment, looking at the cognizance of bias, and then being courageous. Many leaders will just be afraid, and we say that you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable to actually move through this and to become this next leader. And I do think if leaders don't, in fact, and leaders are made, they're not born. So study leadership, understand what it would take to actually service, to lead this new workforce, because you're going to have to lead from the front, similar to what leaders are doing today in terms of leading through a crisis. You're going to have to know how to lead from behind, because you're going to have stars. If you're cultivating this talent, you're going to have to lead from behind, and then you're also going to have to be able to lead from the side. You are going to need to be able to coach. If you are leading, you have to coach your leaders, who then have to coach and really create this environment of belonging and psychological safety, as we say, across the entire team. So I would say it's incumbent upon leaders to take this mantle, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But when we look at it, the ROI is incredible. To be able to navigate your company or your brand, through this process, the ROI, there will be such gratitude. And we see that now as we talk about teaming up. Jackie and I teamed up. It's actually pretty easy, to do. And once you start doing it, and then you have the allies that are teaming up, it really becomes this flywheel, because it is scalable. And that's why we wrote the book, is so that we could start to ignite, this flywheel of teaming up across women of color, and then bringing our allies in, because that's going to give us a bit more wind behind our sail.
It's such good advice, and I love that piece around you have to be committed to this. You can't, leaders have got to sort of walk the walk as well as talking the talk. And I think that point about being comfortable being uncomfortable, or recognizing that you will be in an uncomfortable space in this, and that is okay, I think is critical. Jacqueline, anything to add to that?
One more force that is driving this flywheel, and it's going to exist whether the leaders adapt or not. There is a huge demographic freight train coming at us right now in cities like New York and states like California. The population is already majority minority. New York City is 60%. Majority minority. But if you look at the census data in 2027, which is tomorrow, people of color between the ages of 19 and 25 are going to be in the majority. We have to hire them. They are driving our culture. They are driving our economy, and they're going to run over us if we don't find a way to partner with them, ally with them, and thrive as a result.
What practical advice do you have, Benita, around whether it's sort of hiring practices at Google or in other industries or companies that you've seen? Because quite often I find one of the barriers to other leaders embracing this is that they try and hire on the usual sort of hiring platforms, but they don't get diverse candidates coming through, which I just think is an unacceptable excuse. Is there any kind of advice? Is there any advice that you've got for leaders trying to hire for diverse talent?
Yes. So first of all, Jackie says we're hidden in plain sight, so it's don't even think about the pipeline, but you really do need to go out and activate the community. And there's an interesting thing that happens too. Once you start, And I can speak from experience in terms of my team is quite diverse, right? So, you can lead by example. At the same time, there are opportunities. So for example, one of the things that I did, and I'm not an engineer, but when you think about the historically Black colleges and universities, there's such talent there, such potential, and 25% of the STEM graduates come from historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. And so one of the things that we said, well, what if we actually created an immersion program, and we started with Howard, and so we created Howard West. So Dr. Frederick said, let's go into partnership. Let's actually have this immersive experience. And Googlers came out to actually support and say, what can I do? I'll teach AI. May I teach? I mean, there were so many inbounds. And so we've actually now expanded the program. So now there's, it's a tech exchange. So we have 10 plus HBCUs, and now even Hispanic institutions are also involved in this particular program. It's a long game, but it's so important to look at the data and look at the facts, the changing demographics, and understand how you may have to recruit differently. But don't look in the same places. Go to and ask others, because we like to say in our community, we're 2 degrees of separation. So I get, whether it's a referral for a board, you do need to engage the community. So you can't be sitting on the sidelines looking at the community saying, where are they? You actually need to engage the community, and the community will help you. And there will be such gratitude, because no one wants to be by themselves, and they shouldn't have to be in 2020.
It's such good advice. What's HBCU?
Historically Black college and university.
Right. Okay. Another question. In your book, you talk about natural grit. And I just would love you to share, and maybe Jacqueline, you can start. How do you define grit? How do you use grit when it's most needed?
It started so early. I don't even know when it began, but you just see an opportunity or an obstacle, and you don't let it stop you. You dig deep, you find your inner resources. As we've been talking about the book, and you talk about recovering journalists, I've been asked a few questions about my career covering politics or whatever the topic was. I didn't know you could turn down an assignment. I just, went at it as hard as I could every day. And early in my career, I learned that there were no obstacles. I always tell young people to do something extraordinarily difficult when they're young, so they can find out where there are or are not any boundaries. I went to Harvard Business School 5 days a week and anchored the weekend news in Boston. I would have 24 hours a week to myself, and I did this for 2 years. And I knew at the time that nothing in life would be any more difficult, and nothing has been. We also have a quote in the book from someone who said that his mother, when he would complain about some obstacle or some problem that he was facing, his mother would say, "You are the great grandchild of a runaway slave. You are not hiding in a swamp. There are not dogs coming after you. Get over yourself." So again, I think that there is an historical genetic predisposition to just give it your all. Never say die.
And Benita, how do you recognize grit in your team? Like, do you hire for grit?
I think you can find it, quite frankly, if you study. I've been on our global hiring committee, and you see it. You see it in terms of if you are taking a difficult assignment, how the resume lays out, you can find it, you can ask certain questions for it, but that's why stretch assignments are so important. I think, I always tell people, have you gone to the edge? Do you know what the edge looks like? What is over the edge? Because if you're sitting in the middle, you don't even know this beautiful view because you haven't been there. And so I'm a bit, sometimes they call me the velvet hammer, but sometimes, I'm nudging, because sometimes it's not a natural thing for everyone to explore their grit, to explore their resilience. And so sometimes you have to nudge a bit to create a little bit of discomfort so that people understand their true capability. And so as a leader, it's important for me to ensure that every individual on my team, I want them to reach their fullest potential as long as they are willing to do so as well.
It's funny, Benita, you won't believe this, but that was my nickname at The Guardian, was the velvet hammer. Seriously. I know. So
we're around.
I know, I was smiling when you said that. There's a couple of questions that have come in, and I want to make sure that we get to them. Amanda Lukoff, who's here, if we can unmute Amanda. Amanda, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's great to see you. Hi, Amanda. What's your question?
Hi, Juliet. Thank you both so much for this wonderful talk. It's been so interesting. I'm really interested in resilience from a personal perspective in my own life. And when you guys were both talking about natural grit, you both seem to speak towards themes of resilience. And I just wonder if there is a difference between resilience and grit. As you were talking, I thought maybe it was resilience and persistence is the grit. It's more than just working hard. Could you kind of just go into a little bit more about your view on that interplay?
I mean, I would say within the Black community, there's so many things that impact your life. And just from a personal perspective, and Jackie and I, when we teamed up, we didn't know this, but we actually experienced, grief and tragedy very early in our age. We were both 47. Our fathers were 47 when they passed away, and Jackie was a senior in college. I was a freshman in college. So we had something that happened to us very early, in our careers. But our fathers were such role models for us. There was just a natural, you can call it natural grit, but we were going to get through. From my perspective, my father, he was one of the first, African-American pilots in the U.S. Air Force. He flew the B-58, Mach 2, which is twice the speed of sound. Like, he was a pioneer. So I knew that I would be a pioneer. I wasn't afraid. And so I built that up over time. And sometimes it is your life experiences that start to shape you. But that is something that Jackie and I found that we had in common. And then we did research it as well. So we said, okay, let's do some conjoint analysis with our survey to see if, in fact, fathers as a role model, is that an important part of women in business? And we found it was. In fact, with Black women, Latinx community, the women where their fathers are a role model, which we probed, they're more likely to have greater education and greater earning potential.
And thinking about this for the book, there are two major lessons that I was lucky enough to have my father give me. One is to know to trust my own mind more than anyone else's. He did it in a simple way. He wouldn't let me buy faddish clothing. He said, when you wear good conservative clothes, you're always in style. And that led to a few tears. But again, I didn't go along with the crowd. I trusted myself. And the other thing that he said, and this is my very first conscious memory, he said, when you're Black in America, to be equal, you have to be superior. And that was a recognition of institutional racism. A lot of people think it's unfair or just too difficult. But my reaction was, oh, is that all it takes? I mean, the world standard is just passing. The world standard is just a C. And when you're a kid, going to school is your job. And so nothing was more important than working really hard and getting good grades. And, I got an 800 on my Latin college board, and I got in early decision to the Ivy League college that I applied to, and I only applied to one business school and got in it. So I had validation for this attitude of superiority, even if I was the only one who knew it. But it was my superpower. It gave me great confidence. But again, thinking through some of the issues in the book, it's not that I or Benita or someone else is superior. The point is no one is inferior. And that embrace or belief of inferiority drives the imposter syndrome. It drives the emotional tax that onlys have to deal with. And I stumbled across a quote. It was Martin Luther King quoting W.E.B. Du Bois, two great philosophers and thinkers in the Black community. And W.E.B. Du Bois said 100 years ago that oppressors have condemned people of color to a poisonous fog, a myth of inferiority from birth to the grave. And it was Dr. Du Bois' mission to destroy that myth. And I say, just as Benita said, we can ask our allies to just open a glass door. We don't have to deal with this burden of inferiority. It's just a fog. We can just blow it away. Just embrace our mental health. It's not true for anyone.
It's so inspiring, Jackie. No one's inferior.
No one.
Yeah. Amanda, thank you for that great question. And we've got time for one more. Angela, I'd love to come to you. Hi, Angela.
Hello, ladies. I wrote in the chat, you're one part playbook coaches, another part inspiration. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. So one of the things that the women I work with often struggle with is self-promotion, right? So many women wait to be noticed and rewarded, thinking, if I do a good job, someone will notice and promote me or give me a bonus or give me a bigger span of responsibility. I'm curious, how did you learn to self-promote during your career journeys?
Well, in the book, we call it the humble brag, because I think no one really wants to just promote themselves. Men do it very well, quite frankly. And so I would see it all the time. And I do think you have to learn how to do it with finesse. And I think when I became a manager, I also believe this is the responsibility of the leaders, is that you need to do it for others. And so I would always take people's work that was just, superb. And I said, I know they're not going to promote themselves, but I will promote them. And so again, it's this teaming up to be able to take work, provide promotion, for individuals. And I think you'd have to develop a way of showcasing your work. And usually showcasing your work comes through collaboration. So if you start to extend out from your team to other teams and you know how to add value, that is the most important thing that you can do, is to tackle a tough problem or add value. And when you add value, you are giving yourself a very strong headline that you can solve problems, you're innovative, you're creative, and you are looking at things in a different way, and that you're value added. So when you're value added, you're brought to the table, you're brought in the room.
And Benita's talked about IQ and EQ and now cultural intelligence, CQ. And in 2 years of working together, I've learned there's also BQ. What would Benita do?
I love that. And that kind of brings it to a natural close. But I'd love to hear from you both. What's the number one thing you hope readers take away from this book? And what is the thing that you're most looking forward to? Jackie, do you want to go first? Well,
I'm going to be a shameless self-promoter. I want them to read it. We received our first review yesterday, and the verdict was anyone interested in the role of Black women or women in general in business will learn a great deal from this well-argued book. I want people to hear the argument. We were so gratified by that, because we do lay out a thesis, and we're giving your members a discount. So buy the book.
And we have included the link in the chat, but we'll also be sharing it with the Women in Worth community after this as well. And Benita?
I would say we started with a rallying cry, which is around women of color teaming up and having the allies come alongside. And so for me personally, I think the joy will come from not having onlys. I would love to see that 47% change. And I know that it's possible. It's just a matter of hiring in multiples. And I don't think that should exist in any professional environment. And so that would be teaming up and changing the trajectory and changing the blessing to more collaboration across all.
Thank you so much, Benita and Jackie. You really are an inspiration and a blessing, and thanks so much for an open and insightful and thoughtful discussion into your book, and many congratulations on it. I think team up, advocating for the onlys and leading from the front are all critical messages. And most importantly, I'd like to say thank you to all of you that joined us today and for your great questions. We hope you enjoyed it. Please do share any feedback with us at community@worth.com. We will be including a link and a reminder of the discount after this session. And also a reminder to sign up and share to any of people in your network about the Women in Worth membership. You can email us at member@worth.com. It really is a powerful community focused on accelerating progress for women and minorities, and you get exclusive access to events, content, and a network outside of your normal network. So we would love to have you join. And please keep an eye on our future events that are upcoming every day, worth.com/events. In the meantime, be kind to yourself and others, stay healthy, stay safe, enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks once again, Jackie and Benita.